my microphone was muted. So, welcome everyone. Back with another show. Might be something a little bit controversial, but we'll see what happens. Today's guest is someone that I met on a chat where on Raw had invited a couple of people, and that's where I thought, well, maybe this would be a good thing to do a show on. So my guest today is Mr. Robert Baty. Um, Mr. Baty, can you do a brief introduction of yourself, please?
Yes. Uh, my name is Robert Baty. I'm 70 years old together in different parts of the country. We're about the same age. We both happen to be theists, uh, but of a different kind. Kent, in his adult life, became a tax protester, sovereign citizen type, and I became a civil servant and spent my working career in Oklahoma City for the Internal Revenue Service. Back in the 90s, the 1990s, a preacher came to my local church, happened to be from Alabama, curiously enough, and promoted the young earth creation science theology. And I happened to find interest in some of his points and took exception to them. And that didn't go over so well with the locals and with him, but it stimulated my interest in the movement and the issues they raised. And in that context, you can see where my path and Kent's path might cross. He's a young earth creation science promoter who doesn't like paying taxes or the government. And I work contrary to young earth creation science and had a career in enforcing tax laws. And so ultimately, our paths did in fact cross, and I've covered his story for many years now, uh, and it's been somewhat controversial. He and his people don't seem to care for me much, uh, and yet his story has continued to, in my opinion, uh, be worthy of public attention, and so I've given it that uh, rather than play golf or have other hobbies. Kent Hovind has essentially become my hobby. Uh, Kent has advised people like me to find something to do and do it, and I do it. Some people think I do it pretty well, and that may be what really irks Kent Hovind and his people about it, although they express a little bit different opinion about the quality of my work. His story came to a head, you might say, back in 2006 when he and his wife were arrested on federal charges. Uh, he and his wife were both convicted. They both went to prison. His wife for a year or so, and Kent for 8 years or so, after which he got out in 2015. So there's quite a long history as to how Kent and his wife wound up being arrested in 2006 and what has followed since that time. Uh, we can discuss that in various details as we go along. It is interesting that Kent at times and his people would suggest he doesn't really know very much about me. But back in 2012, in civil proceedings in U.S. tax court, his wife's separate tax court case was decided, after which I was successful in getting Forbes contributor Peter J. Riley to cover the story. He is a CPA and specializes in tax issues in his Forbes.com coverage. And it was perhaps in consequence to Peter's covering that story that would ultimately lead for him to write perhaps 100 articles for Forbes and for his own personal blog on Kent Hovind. He's become somewhat of a specialist, maybe even more so than I am, as to the Kent Hovind case. To that early coverage by Peter, Kent's people, while he was in prison at that time, contacted me and wanted me to contact Kent to talk to Kent while he was in prison. And the federal system has this wonderful core links system whereby the inmates can communicate via email. So I responded positively and set up a core links exchange with Kent and had some questions for him, and he had questions for me. And at the time that was set up, not very long after his wife's case was decided, and the tax court was on the verge of deciding Kent's own separate U.S. tax court case, Kent and I began that exchange. And he would ask me questions about his case and what I thought about it. And I would ask him questions which he wouldn't answer, although I tried to be responsive to him. And I advised him that his wife's case had been decided, and he acted like he didn't know anything about it. And I mentioned that his case was on the verge of being decided by the U.S. tax court, and he acted like he didn't know anything about it. So I sent him information about that and asked him more questions, which he would not answer. And after trying to be responsive as possible to his questions in that context and press him on, Kent, now it's time for you to help answer my questions. One of which was, how could you not know what happened in your wife's tax court case and your own tax court case that is about to be decided? Never got an answer. The next thing I got was a note from the Core Links people saying Kent had cut me off. In any case, we have years of my coverage of the Hovind case, of which Kent has been quite involved with and knows a lot about me and what I do, even though he plays dumb at times. And he has a low opinion of my work. Ultimately, Kent claims that he is innocent of the 2006 charges, and he tries to ignore the civil case that is separate. And he's pledged the rest of his life to pursuing the government and the people involved in his prosecution, either till he dies or until he gets what he wants out of it, which is exoneration. So we can anticipate he will continue his antics, which are founded on sovereign citizen legal theories, until he dies. And he's explained in times past that the reason he does that, in part, is because preachers usually don't fare so well if they admit to being guilty of such crimes as he was charged and committed. And so we currently have, after other cases coming and going, a $500 million plus federal claim pending. I prophesy that it will shortly be dismissed. But he and a fellow named Paul John Hansen are the plaintiffs in that case. And both Hovind and Hansen were involved in some additional litigation in 2015, whereby Kent was able to escape conviction, but Hansen conviction was upheld, and he went to prison on an 18-month sentence. He's out now and living with Kent Hovind or around Kent Hovind's compound, or at least spending a lot of time down there recently. And Hansen is the one responsible for putting together these sovereign citizen type filings that Kent has been sending to the courts lately. And unfortunately, it's difficult to pursue the details at times with no adversary to help guide the story along. Kent had an opportunity to be.
Oops, you froze. So let me jump in real quick. We did have some issues earlier with Mr. Baty's internet connection, so we'll try and see if we can resolve this. I'm not sure if Mr. Baty hears us at this moment. We'll have to see how that goes. Is it? Yeah, I'll wait for Randall's question to see whether or not we can get Mr. Baty back. I'm not even sure that he realizes that he's fallen off. So let me see if I can just message him real quick. And yep, now he's completely gone. So I'll leave a message. Okay, this was something that we were aware of just before the show started. We were hoping that it would go well, which it did for all the time that he was here. He was present, I think, at least half an hour before the show. I'm not entirely sure if God in some way is intervening and trying to keep Mr. Baty from talking, but who knows? That might even be the case. It's unfortunate, though. Beach Price. I don't think he worked for the CIA. He, as far as I know, he's a former IRS, and so that's where his knowledge comes from, and his knowledge about Kent Hovind's case. What he has done since is monitor everything Kent Hovind does, and he's put that up on his website. So I'm not sure if I actually put the website in the description. Let me have a quick look. No, I haven't yet. So what I'm going to do later is I'm going to add Mr. Baty's website to the description of the video. For now, I'm trying to see if I can get in touch with him to see whether or not he can come back. Twitter doesn't seem to work, so might need to try and see if I can do this through Facebook. And I hate Facebook. So first I need to find him. My apologies. This was something that we hoped wouldn't happen. It's apparently something that came up. He had trouble with his internet connection. Okay, let's see if that works. So yeah, it's not on his end. There seems to be some trouble with the internet connection on his end. So with the supplier. So we'll just have to sit and wait and see whether or not he can come back. And as I said, he might not even have realized that he's no longer there. But he's now completely dropped off the broadcast, so I think he might see that he's no longer present. Not okay. Just check Twitter. Lilith, stop sending me silly pictures. Lilith just sent me a picture. Kent Hovind, I asked God a bunch of times, why did I go to prison? What did I do? Kent Hovind, prisoner 0132016. And then the answer is, I sent Robert Baty to explain that to you. Hear ye him, God. Nice one, Lilith. So it looks like we might have to reschedule, because I think they might be doing some work on his internet connection. I have no clue, but so I have no way of getting in touch with him other than Twitter and Facebook. And it seems that he's not seeing any of the messages. Let me check. No, he hasn't seen the one on Facebook either. So not sure what we're going to do. We're going to wait a couple of minutes. What I could do is, because I did have a few conversations with Mr. Baty before this, so if anyone from the side chat has any questions, maybe I could answer them while we're waiting. Oh, we've got a nice person in the side chat, I see. No, Mr. Street Preacher, we're not children of the devil. Is it common for people to deny anything about the spouse's financial situations in investigations? So I know for a fact that in the US, they don't have to answer questions regarding a spouse. So I'm not entirely sure what kind of rule that was, but so if they're asked questions that could incriminate their spouse, they don't have to answer. So I think they can plead the fifth, is what it's called. But and Beach Price, his appeal, as far as I know, he doesn't have a case. So it's probably going to be thrown out because his conviction was entirely legal. There were no mistakes made, um, and as far as I know, and I talked both to Kent and to Mr. Robert Baty, Kent's interpretation of the case is different. So, yes, if the case would have been uh, what Kent claims it to be, then he would have been in his full right to claim damages for unlawful imprisonment. But that's not the case. That seems to be a problem with Kent. He just doesn't want to acknowledge um the actual facts, and he's been warned. So I followed a lot of the case. He has been warned to not. So he refused to have legal representation in the case. Um, he was warned not to do that because he has no clue what he's doing. Um, so that was one part. And on Jer, I didn't have breakfast, and my dog's not available for comment. She's sleeping. So, well, it does seem that we can't get Mr. Beatty back. I've Let me check again whether or not the message hasn't gone through on Facebook and on Twitter. It also didn't go through. So, no clue how we could resolve this. I could try one other thing. There we go.
I told you I was having trouble.
Yes. Well, I tried to fill in the empty, uh, the dead air as good as I could.
Thanks for waiting for me.
Yeah. Well, as I said, we'll just take the risk and do the show. And if something happens, then something happens. It's not too big of a deal. At least you got back.
Yeah. Part of what I was also wanting to maybe provide by way of introduction is the history of Kent's animosity towards me.
I was
Kent,
I was wanting to get there. So one question I really like to have answered, because that was I called Kent, and people can go to our channel because
did I freeze up again?
No, you're still here. You're still here. There might be a slight delay on what you see on screen. Let me see. This should work better. So there might be a slight delay.
Not me this time. Huh?
No. So the question that I had, because Kent mentioned that when I called him, and that call is on our channel, is that he said you are a former IRS man who was brought out of retirement just to go after Kent. What's your reply?
You want me to answer that question first?
No, do mine first, and then we'll.
Okay. Okay. I have tried to get Kent.
Whoops.
Years ago.
Okay. Now you're cutting out a little bit.
How's it sound now?
Now it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Years ago, I dabbled in the science issues. I've since left that mostly for the experts and have concentrated on Kent's legal issues, which I think are much simpler to deal with and are much more serious from a social aspect. And we just need to get together and talk about a few fundamental concepts, details about that, and he's refused to do so. I think that's because he knows he's wrong. and that his sovereign citizen legal theories are all wrong. But there's a long history of him making up excuses as to why he won't face me. A number of people have tried to get him to. And one of the incidents in that regards that motivated me to do a little more regarding the issues I considered is back in 2016 when he met with Bernie Dealer, atheist out of Portland, Oregon, I think. He's now deceased, but he had a YouTube program and he would interview people.
I've
Kent
that.
Hovind,
Yeah, I've seen
Kent
that.
Hovind was, Kent Hovind was on his show a number of times. And back in June 24th, 2016 broadcast, Bernie finally got around to asking Kent if he would be interested in debating me. And this is Kent's response from that program, which is still online today. Kent said, "No, I'm not interested in talking to the guy. I don't think he's interested in the truth at all on the topic. I've heard from reliable sources he's an IRS agent and a plant and is working for the government. So yeah, I'm not interested in talking to him."
That's exactly what he told me during
Pretty
my
close. We'll get to that in a minute too. That's his typical spiel when people try to get him to talk about his legal problems. And Kent, we'll see later, can be considered an expert in his legal problems despite his effort to try and put it off on somebody else. If we move up a little later to October 2019, just about a year ago, Kent and Mark Drysdale were on the Modern Day Debate Show talking about stuff, the sciencey stuff more than anything else. Mm-hmm. But in the question and answer series segment, someone asked the moderator about me, and before he could get a question out of his mouth, Kent had a response. The moderator said, "I don't know," somebody had asked a question apparently. The moderator says, "I don't know who Robert Baty is. I guess it's a person who," and then Kent jumps in and says, "Robert Baty is a former IRS agent that they called out just to hassle me. He had three followers until he started picking on Kent Hovind. He had three followers. He jumped up to 80 followers. He is a legend in his own mind. No, I won't debate him on structuring. Structuring is unrelated to anything about creation evolution. I did not break the structuring law. There's a website, Kent Hovind Innocent. Kent Hovind is innocent. Video number 3 goes on for an hour and a half from my paralegal on that topic. I did not break any structuring laws, but they did give me 10 years in prison for it. And we're going to fight that until I die. We're going to win. No, I wouldn't give Robert Baty the time of day. He's not interested in truth at all." Kent for years had been proclaiming his innocence, and yet he won't talk with a legitimate adversary that might show him why he was guilty, which he fully knew. He knows full well why he was guilty, but he's got this act he puts on when he's talking about it publicly, declaring his innocence.
Yeah.
And then if we move up to just last week, Friday, was that when it was? He talked to you, and you asked him. And if we talked about nothing else but structuring, which might take 10 minutes, we could accomplish some good. And Kent claims structuring is his fundamental legal problem, but he won't talk to anybody publicly about his position and the truth of the matter. Mm-hmm. But when you asked him to join us in this program, Kent said, No, not with Robert Baty. I wouldn't trust a thing he said. He's a former IRS agent they brought out of retirement. My understanding is to hassle me. The IRS broke over 100 laws to put me in prison. He's on damage control right now, so no. We have a lawsuit in court right now for the damages they did. That's the $500 million suit we were talking about. And so I don't want to get involved with him at all. When I win the lawsuit, then he'll have to say Hovind was right. He'll never say it until then. I just ignore him. I don't want to be out with him for any reason. If you want to have me on separately, make a list of questions that he asks, statements, accusations he makes. Let me answer them. That would be afterwards, okay? I'm extremely busy here. We've got 30 people live at our ministry.
Mr. Baty, the entire conversation is on our channel, so people who want to see it, I'll put a link to that in the description of this video later as well. So it is still open whether or not he will accept my invitation to come on the show and reply to this one. Earlier I sent him an email, so he's aware. I told him what time we would be doing the show, and I told him that I would send him a link, which I did. So I'll be calling him back tomorrow. That's what I agreed to do. So he would have time to watch the show, and if he wants to reply to anything, I will be honest. So if he comes on our show, I cannot sneak you in to have that confrontation. So that wouldn't be a good thing to do. But I'm hoping that he will reply and will be coming on our show to explain a couple of things. We do have another question from the side chat. It's from Dog. Considering Kent's $500 million lawsuit is so far-fetched nonsense, are his lawyers guilty of extortion for pursuing the matter?
No, not at all. What makes you think he's got lawyers? He and Hansen filed that $500 million lawsuit pro se. Hansen is an expert at filing sovereign citizen lawsuits and documents, legal mumbo jumbo. You can Google him and find out a little bit more about his history. And last I checked, he was a fugitive from justice on a warrant out of Douglas County, Nebraska, which is available online, on some misdemeanor stuff that they're not going to extradite him for, apparently. But it's reflective of the kind of person Kent is and the kind of people he brings in around him. The paralegal that he mentioned in one of those statements about all those videos that are on the internet supposedly proving his innocence, that guy is Brady Byram, another guy that's been in and out of jails over the years. Hansen the other day even was bragging about he'd been in jail a total of about 5.5 years over his career. He's about 60 years old, I think. And so he's the kind of guy, or both of them, Brady and Paul, don't seem to mind having to spend some time in jail. Some people are just like that. So they do their thing, and if once in a while they wind up in jail, three hots and a cot, suits them just fine. So don't worry about the lawyers behind the $500 million case. There ain't none as far as legitimate lawyers that would file that sort of thing.
Okay, so we have a question about that. Has he actually filed a lawsuit, or is he just claiming that he filed a lawsuit to collect money in order for, No,
the federal lawsuit, based on civil rights complaints to get it into federal court, was filed in May. We're now 6 months later, and it's on the verge of being dismissed, in my opinion. We'll see, hopefully, in a few days. But in that 6 months, there have been 3 amended complaints filed, and the court, at least once, has already filed a report and recommendation about it being dismissed. Subsequent to that, they decided to take another look at it, and that's what we're waiting on now, is for them to complete that action and then again ultimately dismiss it. One of the unusual aspects is that normally when you file a federal lawsuit or any kind of lawsuit, you're going to get a summons and issue the defendant the summons to let them know officially that they're being sued. And that process usually doesn't take very long, a few days, a couple of weeks. In Kent's case, he hasn't served any of his defendants official notice that they're being sued, which is not a good sign if you want to seriously prosecute a case. One of the things also noticeable about the lawsuit is he's suing the United States government, which is okay, I guess. He's also suing the investigator, Scott Snyder, the attorney for the government that handled the trial work, Michelle Heldmeyer, another USDA, John David Roy Atchison, and he's even trying to sue his personal defense attorney. And one of the things Kent has been known to do, from my perspective, is really attack people personally when they best him, like the feds did in 2006. He talks a good game when he's dealing with other people and how they should just move on. And in other aspects of his life, Kent has just moved on. He ran off 2 wives. He just moved on to the next woman. Alienated his kids and grandkids. He's just moved on. He's now got a herd of kids running around his compound and other young people he can consider his family. And he's alienated his brother and sister. However, while Kent can move on from all of that, he apparently can't get over the fact that he was successfully prosecuted and sent to prison. He's not going to get over that by his own admission. He's going to whine about that until he dies, because there's no indication he's ever going to establish he was innocent. The facts clearly show that he was guilty as charged.
No.
And it's all mumbo jumbo from him in an attempt to establish his innocence. Lying for years about structuring is the key element that I've centered on, while there's a lot of other issues we can discuss and may discuss as we get time and the computer keeps working. Structuring is something Kent has made a keystone of his case, and I'm ready to fight that battle and establish Kent needs to stop lying about it and admit that by his own admissions, he is guilty under the law. He just lies about the law and what the rules are and whether they're applicable to him.
Yeah. So that was a thing that that I noticed as well. So the way what he claims is structuring isn't actually the correct definition that the government is using, and according to his definition, everybody is structuring, because if you take money out of your own bank account several times a day and it's less than $10,000, a lot of people do that. I mean, just go shopping for Christmas. That would be a good thing, I think. But so we did have a question from Lilith. Can you actually sue a lawyer for doing his job? Is that even a possibility in the U.S.?
Well, it's like with doctors, you can sue for malpractice. They're tough cases to make. But if Kent thought he had a case against his defense lawyer, he would have got a real lawyer and sued him a long time ago. This is just part of the game Kent's playing. His defense attorney in 2006 and his wife's defense attorney in 2006 were handpicked by Kent. He got the defense he wanted. He claims he paid a lot of money for that defense. And he presents a scenario where his lawyer might have been guilty of failing to properly represent him, but I don't think that would hold up. Mm-hmm. And you need to appreciate the fact that if there was serious merits to his case, he would not be filing what he's filing. He would have gone after his lawyer a long time ago. And other people he gets crosswise with, like me. I mean, his people have been wondering why Kent hasn't sued me for years, because he doesn't have a case. And he certainly doesn't want to be publicly outed were he to file a case and have to properly prosecute it. So he files this nonsense. A number of years ago, he filed a lawsuit against Rational Wiki because they put in an article about him that he was a tax fraudster. And telling people Kent's a tax evader or guilty of tax evasion really ticks him off. And he goes into this wordplay about the technical details of the law he was charged under. Mm-hmm. But he filed that federal case and then never served the defendants. And ultimately that case was dismissed.
Okay. So
that's an interesting story in itself.
I want to respond to a question that has come up on screen about the boy drowning at DAL. We'll get to that in just a minute.
I'd like to respond to a question I saw flash across earlier about whether we could expect Kent to know about his wife's financial stuff. I think that was the substance of the question that came up.
Yeah, whether or not he can be
expected to know about it.
Yes.
The reason I mentioned that is because her case and Kent's case were basically the same case. What happened is the tax court split them up. And she finally wised up a bit and went out and got a real lawyer to take her case to tax court. Mm-hmm. And Kent's went on a separate track. But the issues in the case are all the same. What the tax court ultimately decided in his wife's case is that for lack of evidence to the contrary, and based on the government's prosecution, she was charged with being liable for half the tax. They basically treated their business as a partnership and said she gets to pay half the tax. And she lost. So she got stuck with millions of dollars worth of personal civil liabilities. We don't know what's become of that. Perhaps she's managed to ignore it or pay some of it, or ultimately get the government to somehow compromise it on other grounds. But that's why he can be expected to know, is because it's all the same case. How much money did they make during all those years, and what penalties might be applicable? Mm-hmm. And along with the tax went the fraud penalty.
Yeah,
the civil fraud penalty, which is a financial penalty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just got to mention in the side chat, reading out the question. I think I did earlier when you dropped off, and now it
Yeah,
disappeared.
that's when it froze up.
No, Lilith took it away, so I can't read it. But it was basically it was from Randolph Richardson, a good friend of mine, and he said, "Is it common to deny knowledge or to not have? Oh, is it common for people to deny knowing anything about their spouse's financial situations in investigations, e.g., an attempt to do plausible deniability?" I think if I'm not correct, in the U.S. you can just deny answering questions regarding your spouse. Isn't that
Yeah, you can plead the Fifth Amendment, not answer questions, and you can't be forced to testify against a spouse.
hmm
There
that
are
was it?
different technical aspects of it. In
Yeah.
this case, though, as the criminal trial showed, uh, their business was. Uh, they were both involved in the business and the management of it, and what was going on. Now, to what extent might be arguable. Maybe his wife's problem was she was a fundamentalist Baptist wife, had been for 30 years, and Kent kept her under his thumb, and she did what he said,
hmm
even though she didn't like it. I
Yeah.
think his wife's mother, Kent's mother in law, was actually an accountant, a tax return preparer, and the evidence would suggest that they didn't get along so well because they knew Kent was nuts when it came to tax matters, but they were also fundamentalist Baptists, at least his wife, and she put up with it for 35 years or so before divorcing him, and having been to prison rather than to speak up. Kent, in my opinion, could have kept her out of prison, could have kept her from being assessed millions in personal income tax if he'd have just manned up and accepted responsibility that this was all his doing and that she should not be penalized,
hmm
uh, and then made a deal for himself. He refused to play ball, played hard to get, sat on his hands, and so he got a 10-year sentence when he might have got out for probation or at least a year or two. But he looked for a worst case scenario and he got it.
hmm
And now he's playing that up to improve his status as a martyr in his new last days theology. The end is coming, and they're coming to get me, and they're coming to get you, and this is proof of it.
Yeah. So, and another thing relating to all of this that I wanted to get to is, so he's now he has this lawsuit of $500 million. But what you also told me, which I find interesting, is that Kent is apparently buying up real estate in around Dinosaur Adventureland, which is something that he also had done in Pensacola, because they had multiple houses in the neighborhood. They owned them. They owned the properties close to his house, so he could build his Dinosaur Adventureland. So what is going on now at Dinosaur Adventureland, and Kent being interested in real estate?
Because of the lack of transparency, Kent leaves us to speculate. And we only get bits and pieces of the information. But you're correct. He bought up a lot of real estate around where his personal residence was in Pensacola. Ultimately, because of his criminal activities, the government wound up seizing the real estate. His son, at auction, was able to buy some of it back. Uh, but Kent moved to Alabama and found a benefactor who put up supposedly $250,000 for him to buy this 145-acre compound. which he has since been developing. It used to be an old playground for four-wheelers, which it still is, but Kent has added $500,000 or more worth of improvements and continues to build his improvements thereon.
Mm-hmm.
But we have seen since then, he and his people have been buying up other tracts of land near Lenox, Alabama. I think his current girlfriend, Cindy Lincoln, has now at least two other residences up the road, down the way, that is in her name. One of his supporters from Texas bought what's known as the country store down at the crossroads in Lenox, Alabama. And another one of his supporters from Texas, Charles Teague, has bought 40 acres, which is similar to Kent's compound at the end of Kent's Road. And there have been other property situations. Down on the highway or the main road by Kent's compound, there was an acreage with a house on it that was bought by one of Kent's Canadian women who had planned to spend time down there, like a second home or a snowbird or something. She wound up spending time and buying that house, that acreage, and then decided this ain't for me. Got disenchanted, went back to Canada, and through a transaction which has not yet been revealed, apparently Kent or his nominees have bought that, and it's now advertised as an RV park. He even has a Facebook page on it, the Paz Marah RV Park at 3988 County Road 7 in Lenox, Alabama.
Okay, but so where does all the money to buy this real estate come from? Because if you watch Kent's videos, obviously you see him, and pretty much he starts off every video, we need this and we need that, and what I still struggle with is whenever he wants to buy something, he seems to have extremely high prices that the things that he needs are costing. So, do you think that his soliciting for money there is where then the money goes to buying up properties? Because where would he get the funds?
Well, again, that goes to the lack of transparency. Apparently, you don't really need a whole lot of supporters to maintain a lifestyle like that. You just need a few with money.
Mm-hmm.
Kent's handler, Ernie Land, has bragged about Kent having millionaire backers ready to finance whatever he wants to do in Alabama. That could be part of the story. I certainly don't have an inside track on that. But all I can do is observe the bits and pieces of information as they might come to us. His girlfriend buys up some property. His friends buy up property. I think he's probably careful. Nothing's going to show up in his name because he's got millions in liabilities to the government, who wouldn't let him own a piece of property if they found out about it, from what I can tell. And his 145 acres, of course, are owned by his tax-exempt corporation, which I think is a sham, but he's managed to convince the government to let him operate that way. And he doesn't have to file any returns to account for any of the money. So this is just an open question, and people can speculate and have their suspicions based on what they know about it. And maybe Kent will talk about some of those details, maybe not. Eventually, maybe one of these days we'll wake up and Kent will be on the front page, and there would have been 100 federal agents swoop in there to take control of everything for some reasons that maybe we have not even figured out.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and then we have a question that has been on screen for quite a while. People are curious about this. Um, do you know anything about the kid that drowned on the property? And then we'll go back to the subject that we were on just now.
Okay. I have an article on the drowning at the property on my website, which contains a lot of information. On March 15th of this year, uh, Stephen Alexander from Indiana, I think it was, drowned at Kent's place.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, as a result of the neglect of his parents and the neglect of the property's owner, Kent, as far as how he operated. Uh, the man and his wife went down there with their 5 kids to get away with stuff going on at home, and they were looking to have a good time. And Sunday, March 15th, was the first day after they got there. I think they arrived late at night. And Sunday was the first day, and she put out a live Facebook post saying how wonderful it was, not knowing that later that day she would be one child short. And there was almost 2 children apparently drowned, but the father was able to rescue one of the children once he was made aware, hey, we got some problem out here. And it was after he rescued that one child and he started counting heads, as the story goes, he realized, I've got 5 kids, there's only 4 here, where's Stephen? And they ultimately found him off the side of the dock under the water and tried to revive him unsuccessfully. And curiously enough, despite the fact that the police were out there and Child Protective Services showed up to investigate, Child Protective Services were run off by Kent under the guise, apparently, that the parents were so distraught they should wait to talk to them. I don't know if they ever were able to talk to the parents or not, but Kent ran off the Child Protective Services people that day, and the parents didn't waste a whole lot of time getting out of there and going home.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have an autopsy report that I know of that's been made public. The theory promoted by Kent is that the kid fell and hit his head and went off into the water.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or something else,
Yeah.
but
So
that's the story.
I think and that is the problem, because there is not a lot of transparency, and I've heard rumors where they went to the hospital, and while they were uh, trying to revive the boy or working on the boy, Kent was in another room handing out uh, flyers of Dinosaur Adventureland. I mean, that would be a cool story, but that's not something that I could verify. So
Yes, I remember hearing that story, and apparently someone from the hospital or somebody there did provide testimony that that's what was going on, that Kent
Mhm.
was at the hospital advertising his place while the kid was dead in the other room.
Yeah.
There's so many situations like that. Another tip of the iceberg, how much goes on at the compound as far as people getting hurt, disappearing, coming and going, who they are, what they've done.
Which is something
We
that I
don't know.
which is something that I wanted to ask you about, because um, um, I keep forgetting his last name. Theodore, his former tech guy, went on and started a website called Lies of the Devil, which he initially had solely dedicated to everything about Kent, because he recorded a lot of the conversations that went on there, with Kent not knowing that he was recorded. He recorded conversations between Kent and Eric, which he has posted on his YouTube channel. And to this day, people who will leave the compound, he will get in touch with them and then have them tell their story. So, how credible is the information that Theodore is putting out these days?
I think some of what he puts out that goes to these issues is credible and valuable. You just have to be careful in how far you go with it. I have a article again on my website featuring references to Theodore's videos. It lists the title, provides the link, so you can run down that list, maybe see what interests you and listen in. I think it is a valuable work. Part of the trouble, however, is Theo was Kent's IT guy, and he managed a lot of what Kent was doing that was problematic. One of which was spending a lot of time attacking me
Mm-hmm.
and some of the people I associate with on his free Kent Hovind website. A lot of articles there attacking me and some of the people I associate with. And Theodore also has some odd religious views like Kent that, is some concern. So you just have to be careful and be aware that Theo has some baggage and he's doing who knows what now. I think maybe he's pretty much gotten out of the business and retired to maybe make more of a normal life for himself and his wife in Arizona, which is where he's from. I'd like to think he's maybe trying to get on track instead of promote some of the stuff he's done historically.
Yeah. So from what I know, he had started up some kind of an online ministry and is no longer doing that. They were traveling across the country, handing out free DVDs. He basically followed in Kent's footsteps in asking people to donate money so they could provide people with these free DVDs. We got a comment from Beach Price. He says, "I think it's creepy that he was asking for more women to go to the compound because of so many lonely guys." It does seem that there are a lot of men there, and this goes back to why Theodore was kicked off, because Theodore obviously wasn't legally married to his wife, and that was and because they shared time in the same shack. That was why he was kicked off the compound, because they couldn't have that. At least that's what Theodore says about it.
I don't know the intimate details of that, but I think the reality is, from what I've heard and listening to that story, is that Theodore and his wife had the same kind of marriage that Kent and Mary Taco had, a
Mm-hmm.
common law legal marriage. Kent and Theo dispute some of the details, but ultimately it may be that they were both on equal terms as far as the law is concerned. Kent has tried to exploit it to make some distinctions. I don't know if they hold up or not. But Kent had a civil, common law, legal marriage to Mary Toko after Joe, his first wife, divorced him. And he made a big deal about it, made videos about it. They presented themselves as husband and wife, and it was recognized in Alabama as legally binding. Now Kent is trying to say, oh no, it was just a church wedding with Mary Toko where we
Yes.
waved our hands and said we were married, and when she ran off, I waved my hands and said we're not married anymore. They
Yep.
didn't get a legitimate civil divorce. There's no common law divorce rule. You have to go through the civil court.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not anybody can successfully complain about that is something else.
Mm-hmm.
But it's my position that Kent is still married to Mary Toko because there's no record been presented of a legal divorce.
Yeah.
Kent just says, I waved my hands and we agreed to be no longer married. So now he's taken up with a third woman, and there's nothing to show they got a legal marriage of any kind.
Which
Can't just
which brings me to one thing, because as I said earlier, we met on a private chat that up where Arn Ra had invited a couple of people, and so I don't know who came up with it, but someone did make the joke that since Kent is constantly asking Arn to put up legal documents to show that his legal name is actually Arn Ra, where are the documents that Cindy is now Mrs. Hovind? That we haven't seen that happen yet, which I thought was kind of funny to just bring that up.
I think that's something that Kent ought to be pressed about. For as long as I've known them, Cindy Lincoln, the woman he lives with, has been Cindy Lincoln. Her Facebook page, her public claims, and all that sort of stuff, she's Cindy Lincoln. Then the other day, all of a sudden, in a testimonial video on Kent's channel, she says, I'm Cindy Hovind. Okay, prove it.
Yes.
You claim you got married. I saw the video and the horse-drawn carriage and the preacher and the ceremony where Kent and Mary Taco were legally married in a common law wedding in Alabama in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen nothing to support the notion that what Kent and Cindy have is a marriage, especially since he seems to still be married to Mary Toko.
Mm-hmm.
Is he just an adulterer, or is he a bigamist? What's going on here? Did they have another common law marriage in some place where it's legal? Or is it just Kent waved his hands and said, we're now man and wife with Cindy, and if we get in trouble, I'm going to wave my hands again and say we're not really married? And that's, I think, what's going on at the compound, because he's always advertising now somebody's getting married there. And he's wanting women to come for his young men and do whatever they do in that kind of environment. And we've seen in times past that some of those work out, some of them don't. A young woman from Montana or Wyoming showed up down there in 2015 or 16 right out of high school and found an old man from Europe, 10 or 12 years older than she was. She wound up going to Europe with him and getting married. They seem to be doing all right. On the other hand, one of Kent's up-and-comers in years gone by, Levi Roberson, came to the compound and found a young woman there, a local girl, 10 or 12 years younger than him. They eloped, and, that was a disaster. And she's now left him and returned to Alabama, and Levi's gone back home to Washington State. And so that's, again, part of the social curiosity as to what kind of operation is in play on the compound as far as that aspect of it.
Yeah, so and that brings me, because we have limited time. I don't even think we're going to be able to get to all the topics that I wanted to. But there's one that I really want to get to, and that is the whole
structuring.
No, the whole thing with Billy, where Kent wanted. And as I said, I keep forgetting last names. Truck driver Billy, who visited the compound, and then
Billy Summers.
Yes, and then was asked to befriend one of his Kent Hovind's friend, who is a convicted pedophile. And so you've told me that this man has also stayed at Dinosaur Adventureland. Can you tell a little bit about that?
From reports, the man, Chris Jones, has been in and out of the compound at various times. He was involved in trying to report the Bohemian Grove story. Bohemian Grove is a place out in California, old story from years gone by, and the theory is the rich and powerful would meet at Bohemian Grove and drink blood and eat babies and do all sorts of things that you still hear today as far as the conspiracy theories and who runs the world and Satanists and those that really are in control of our everyday lives. And Chris Jones was one of the people trying to out all the elites out there, and he wound up being convicted of some sexual improprieties with some children and going to prison. And it turns out he and Kent Hovind are close friends, to hear Kent tell it. And when he got out of prison, Kent was wanting to promote him as being just like him, another innocent man that was railroaded into prison. And for some reason, rather than promote him on his own YouTube channel, Billy Summers, who also has a YouTube channel and was a supporter of Kent, was asked to consider helping Chris promote himself, apparently. And Billy Summers spent some time at the compound, got disenchanted with all of that. That was kind of Kent, this guy's a registered sex offender. He apparently is guilty of the crimes of which he was charged. I'm not about to get involved in that. And you might start considering me a former supporter now.
Yeah,
I think you might still be able to find some of the video work Billy put out on that, but it's not as easy to find now as it might have been then.
no, I know that Billy deleted a lot of his videos. There are people who have that mirrored, but it would be pretty difficult to find. I think I haven't found it yet. So I do want to give a shout out. Just saw Arn Rob popped up in the side chat. So Arn wants back his baby ribs. Arn, weren't you stuffing a turkey earlier? I mean, you should have plenty to eat. Never mind. So, but what is Hovind's interest in exonerating this guy? So, because that's a pretty horrific crime to be convicted of, and then having that guy on what you call an adventure land, which is, I think, still specifically made for children. I think that would be the last person you want to have over there.
Well, it's of some concern, and he's been reported to Child Protective Services more than once. They've been out there more than once. Somehow or another, the local Child Protective Services people are giving him a pass, while other people are seriously concerned. He's now got quite a number of children staying there, doing who knows what. And in the company, close proximity of some real creepy characters. Chris Jones came and went. Other people have come and gone that you would have reasonable suspicions of. And yet it goes on without any obvious concern by the authorities in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the answer is going to be or where it's going to wind up. We're kind of early on at this phase, everybody could figure out Jim Jones' problems once there's 900 people dead on the ground. that's at the end of the line. We're kind of at the front of the line when it comes to Kent Hovind and what's developing
Hmm.
near Lenox, Alabama.
But
So we can just talk about it.
yeah, so but another thing that you mentioned in the conversation that we had earlier, and that's something that I wasn't aware of. You said that there were people disappearing in the area of Repton, Alabama, and all those disappearances started when Kent Hovind opened up his dinosaur Adventureland. Is that correct, or did I mishear that?
Uh, I don't know what the long term statistics are. I've heard the story more than once, and just recently, uh, a woman apparently from the area mentioned that there had been 3 people disappear, and she wouldn't be surprised if Kent's compound isn't somehow connected to it. Whether anybody there is involved or how true the stories are, I don't know. But it's something you might anticipate could have some truth to it. And 145 acres, such as Kent has, if nothing else, would be a good dumping ground if somebody wanted to get rid of a body. He's got a number of water features, ponds on his place, and a lot of property that doesn't get much traffic. Uh, it might just be speculating too much, but apparently there have been people gone missing and have not been found. And how thoroughly Kent's place might have been searched for calls or not, I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, so Lilith just asked, is it possible that there's a Hovind supporter somewhere in the Child Protective Services that just keeps an eye on things and maybe uh, uh,
It could be. I mean, in his 2015 trial, uh, Peter Riley, who covered that trial, discovered one of the uh, jury members was a supporter of Kent Hovind and most likely affected the outcome of that trial quite favorably for Kent Hovind.
mhm.
And there's some video up about that. And one of Kent's and his people's big thing is jury nullification. Don't worry about whether the guy's guilty or innocent. Lie to get on the jury, and then uh, you can either convict the person or acquit the person for whatever reason you want. That's
Yeah.
jury nullification in practice. And Kent and his people like to emphasize that. And apparently, in that 2015 litigation, that's a little of that might have been going on with this one juror who favorably affected the outcome on behalf of Kent Hovind.
Hmm. Okay. And I've also got a question. Uh, someone who is frequently on modern day debate in the side chat asking good questions. Stupid whore energy. She wants to know if and if so, how many FBI agents would be there.
Well, I don't know. I'd like to think maybe they got something undercover going on. There's been rumors about how active the FBI is in Kanika County, where Kent's compound is. They've had some interesting political things going on that the FBI has had some apparent interest in, and there may be some connections to Kent. And so maybe there are things going on that we just are not going to know about for a while.
Hmm. I'm getting questions from the side chat. It seems that either your microphone or your headphones are rubbing against something, so that's causing a lot of background noise. I'm not sure how that happens, but
Sorry.
okay. Well, we seem to be good. Um, I and then there's another thing that I wanted to cover. So there are two people you say are incremental when it comes to creation science evangelism. One of them is Doc Fogg, Ernie Land. The other guy is a guy who's more well known about his sovereign citizenship. Um, and so,
Hanson,
no, no, no.
Byram.
Byron, yes. And you told me a pretty disturbing story that went that happened within his in crowd. They seem to be looking for people who have had their kids taken away and taking those cases. Can you elaborate on that and what happened after that?
I got involved in covering or following the story about the anti-child welfare movement back in 2016 because Kent's man, Brady Byram, started secretly meddling in the baby Hollum case out of Heflin, Alabama. And Brady went in there on behalf of the parents and started promoting his sovereign citizen notions, which the parents shared to a great extent. And they continued throughout that case. And ultimately, their parental rights were terminated and the baby was adopted. I didn't know what I was getting into when I first picked up on that storyline, but I have since found that there's quite a movement, and the sovereign citizens have apparently targeted that movement to showcase what they're capable of. So since that time, I've seen case after case after case where some parent, dysfunctional to some extent, has trouble with the state regarding custody of the children. And these promoters come in and start selling them the sovereign citizen legal nonsense as if it will guarantee a quick and speedy return of the children. And they have adversely affected so many parents. It's just astounding when you start looking at it. And Brady Byram, according to Ernie Land, was going to go nationwide with his efforts. I haven't been able to figure out just what Brady's been up to since. He really flies low under the radar. So he may or may not still be involved in that activity, but there's plenty that are taking that place. And just recently, it kind of came to a head in Florida this last week or so, in that one of the leaders of the movement, Chris Hallett, who had an outfit called E-Clause LLC, was murdered by one of the women he supposedly was trying to help regarding her child custody issues. For some reason, she showed up at his doorstep and shot him dead. And you can find that in today's news as it is developing. And it's hoped by many people that this will bring attention to the sovereign citizen people to the from the perspective of their involvement in all these child welfare, child custody cases, because of the nonsense they are selling and the damage they're doing. In this case, ultimately leading to the death of one of their movement's leaders, and probably guaranteeing that this young mother will spend the rest of her life in an institution of some sort. How close that story might come to Kent Hovind is yet to be seen. The casual connection is Kent and his people are sovereign citizen theorists and promoters, and that's what got this man killed. And it's not too far from Kent's place. And the extent to which Kent and his people might be connected to that particular case and the people behind it is yet to be known. Maybe it will stay casual, just they're all sovereign citizens, or maybe there's more to the connection. Again, we don't know who's coming and going at Kent's compound, and it may involve a lot of people from the sovereign citizen camp, and they're there coming and going for who knows what nefarious reasons, and where they're acting out their goals. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, I had my microphone muted.
Okay.
Sorry. So I don't want to put out any false accusations that would cause any trouble. So for now, there's no clear evidence that Kent Hovind is tied up in all of this. It's just that the movement is supported by I think by Ernie Land, who probably will run the financial part of this. Is that correct?
Well, I don't. Again, Ernie Land's direct connections to the people involved in the murder is anybody's guess, if at all. But it's the sovereign citizen theology that they all promote and act upon that brings them together.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm just speculating: is it more than that casual connection? Brady Byram, Kent's number one legal theorist when it comes to trying to show he's innocent, was hot and heavy into the baby home case, which resulted not in the child being returned, but with the child being removed from the parents permanently and adopted. That's what sovereign citizen theories and practices will get you. And the woman that apparently killed Chris Hallett the last week or so, according to the story now being presented, realized that Chris Hallett was not working to get her kids back, just the opposite. Him and the people he's associated with, like John Gentry and Kirk Pendergrass and Francis Amato and David Jose. There's a whole list of people that are noteworthy on the internet for doing these sorts of things, selling the big story, using nonsense as if it's going to bring the kids home, and it just doesn't do it. It just enriches the promoter and disappoints the parents, who are quite vulnerable, as you can imagine, being dysfunctional to begin with and then having their kids removed by the state. What are you going to do? And these people come in, sweep in, and exploit them. And people have speculated for some time that something's going to happen, and it happened this last week. Chris Hallett got murdered, apparently, by one of his disappointed clients. And that story's developing as we speak.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so what I find mind-boggling then is we have PZ Myers in the chat as well. He says he's got a sovereign citizen who's been hounding him for a couple of years. He's hilarious as long as he doesn't get any traction in the legal system. Yeah, it would be hard, I think, for at least for what I know about the whole sovereign citizen movement, that there's not a lot of actual truth in what they're trying to do or how they're presenting themselves. But what I find strange is that if you have a Christian ministry, why wouldn't you step away from people like that? that would be the first thing to do. If people are involved in any kind of criminal activity, you would step away from that and make sure that those people aren't connected to your ministry. And you see this so often all across the board, where people, where there's some kind of entanglement somewhere. Is that just a means to get more money? Is that why they involve themselves with these people? What could be a possible explanation for that?
Well, it gets above my pay grade. I'm kind of simple-minded. I can see part of Kent's defense, which has some plausible features to it, is that people need help. I'm here to help them. People have stuff they're running away from. I've got a compound where they can run away. And there's some legitimacy to trying to help people. Whether or not Kent's that legitimate or not, you just have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I think there's reason to be concerned about what's really going on with him and his operations, particularly the fact that, if nothing else, he's using social means like a tax-exempt corporation to avoid having to face responsibility for millions of dollars he owes in personal income tax. And it goes downhill from there. He's got a bunch of young men down there, and he's advertising for young women, and all you have to do to get married is wave your hand, and then if she wants to leave, she can leave, and you wave your hand and you're divorced or annulled. That's the kind of social construct Kent seems to be promoting and practicing. He says he's married to Cindy Lincoln, so we're supposed to believe it. And if she leaves, he'll say, I'm not married to her anymore, and that's the end of it. Well, that's why we have other civil institutions to help protect people from being abused like that and exploited. Mm-hmm. He's got all those kids down there and creepy men coming and going and young men and strange things happening like the drowning. And that's just some of what we happen to pick up on. Mm-hmm. The more serious details we might not even be privy to because he's successfully keeping things under wraps.
Mm-hmm. Critical Cripple just said Kent is literally building a cult compound backed by the Southern citizens and a bucket load of millionaire backers. I'm not entirely sure if he has a bucket load of millionaire backers, but from what we do know, there's at least going enough money to creation science evangelism to do whatever they're doing. I didn't know about the buying of the real estate, for instance. So the fact that he is asking for money for diggers and four-wheelers, it all suddenly puts everything in a completely new light. Is that money actually going to what he's saying he needs it for? It's so I'm hoping that he will respond when I call him tomorrow and come on our show, and maybe we can ask those questions, because that would be something that I'd be interested in.
Yeah, I suspect if you are able to contact him again, that whether he comes on your show or not, he might have a lot to say about what we have been talking about. Mm-hmm. in an effort to evade dealing with the structuring issue. Kent is famous for wanting to talk about one issue at a time with equal time. Mm-hmm. And he asked you to make up questions and accusations and that sort of thing and present to him. Well, I would propose to you that the one issue Kent and I need to start talking about is structuring, because he's been lying about that for years. And he says it's fundamental to understanding his legal problems. And I accept that it is fundamental to understanding his legal problems. So the one issue, Kent, that we need to talk about one-on-one, face-to-face, is your structuring claim and why it's false. You've got nothing to back it up. You know you were guilty. You need to accept that and admit to it.
Well, what I would suggest is what we could do is, because he literally asked for that. Make a list with questions that you have. You and I think, can come up with a list of questions regarding this show, and I will be calling him back tomorrow. I promised to do that. I send him an email so he can watch the show if he has time, have someone else watch it and relay it back to him. Although I wouldn't think that would be a good thing. Not sure if that would, if then everything would be transferred correctly, but that's his issue. We could make a list of questions if he chooses to come on. Things we can address and take it from there. I'm more than happy to do that, and that is what he asked us to do. Whether or not he's going to come on after this show, not sure. Um,
Well, since we got it on video, if he stays with his historical uh, way of doing things, maybe he'll just present a rebuttal video of his own and take clips of this to use in his video. I don't mind making out a list of things if Kent would admit and commit himself to seriously addressing various issues. But if he won't first deal with structuring, we don't need to go to number 2 or 3 or 4 or 10. And I don't want him evading the structuring issue by having a list of questions and evading the structuring issue. That's at the top of the list, Kent. Let's do that first. Then we can, if we get through that successfully, we can talk about these other issues.
hmm Well, yeah, as I said, since he asked me for a list of questions, I'll be more than happy to make a list if he wants to come on. I really want him to come on and respond to what we just said here. Um, and what we can do that after we've gone off air. We still have until tomorrow, until I call him to see whether or not he will come on and actually uh, respond. So, and then we'll have to set a time and a date. I'm really hoping that he will talk to us. So we'll have to wait and see for that. For now, we've been on for about an hour and 40 minutes. So I would really like to close it up right now. Is there anything we haven't mentioned that you think we should? We can do that to end the show on.
I think that should do it for this show. There's plenty
Okay.
more as reflected in my website for those that want to visit it and pick and choose.
I put I put
Otherwise,
I put all of the links to you. So I put the website, your Twitter account, and your Facebook group all in the description. So people who want to know more about the cases that we have discussed, because we do have limited time. We can't get everything out the way we wanted to, but everything is on your website. You got great links at the top of the website that will link you to the several cases that you've been talking about. So pretty much everything there is to need to know, people need to know, can be found on your website. So I would urge people to just click the link and at least go over there. But because it's not only about Kent Hovind, there are lots of other things that you write about there as well. If people want to follow up on everything Kent Hovind, then there's the Facebook group, Kent Hovind's Worst Nightmare, which I recently joined. People can join that on Facebook if they want to, and if they want to talk to you, they can get in touch with you on Twitter. That link is also there. For me, it was a blast talking to you. I've learned a lot that I didn't know about, specifically about Kent Hovind. The reason this channel exists is literally Kent Hovind, because I bumped into one of his videos, and that's where I thought, now I need to go on social media and see if I can at least counter this in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and so maybe if there are new developments, we can do a show like this again in future, or if there's more information you want to have out, we'll be more than happy to have you back for another conversation. It was great talking to you, and as well on as offline, because we had a pretty good conversation before we did this. And that's also why this is kind of chaotic, because it's not as fresh as when you told us the first time. So I need to go back to the other conversation and try and make things sensible for the people who are watching and aren't privy to what we talked about offline. But yeah, thank you for coming, and I'm really hoping we can do this another time again.
You're welcome. I'll look forward to it.
Okay, I want to thank everyone who was in the side chat, people who have thrown us questions. I want to thank Lilith, who was backstage and made sure that all the questions that are relevant came up on screen. We'll keep an eye on the channel. I'll be talking to Kent Hovind tomorrow. At least I will be calling him as promised, and I will let people know on Twitter what happens and if there's going to be another show. So follow YTGGFI on Twitter if you want to know when we're going to do a show. And for now, everyone stay safe and stay healthy, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.